Hello everybody, welcome back. So today we looked at a documentary about the Yeti, and today we're going to do the section in the book where we'll read through about it. Hopefully, if all went well, you've watched the documentary and you've got a sort of interest now in the phenomenon. I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think of it so far. The thing about the Yetis and all of these things. Now, the cryptozoology is the study of these creatures that have never been proved to exist. And one of the most interesting one is skunk apes. And the reason they're called skunk apes is because they're always reported to look like apes, and they have a really weird sulfur fart kind of smell to them. So they've got this reputation as being very smelly. We've got all sorts all around the world. In America, they're normally called Bigfoot or Sasquatch. We've got the Yeti in Tibet and China. There are other names for it around the world. And there are sightings all around the world too. Whether I believe in it or not, I'd like to believe in it. I'd like to believe that it's true. But with these cryptids, which is another word for cryptoids, they just don't get proved. There just doesn't ever seem to be any overwhelming evidence that any of these things really exist. Saw a really good documentary about Sasquatch only a few weeks ago. It was a very interesting setup. The reporter who made the show, he had been involved in a drug operation where they were making illegal drugs outside of LA in California, and a couple of guys turned up late at night and said, in panic, just blind panic, Sasquatch had attacked their camp and killed everybody. And he remembered this from when he was 17, and it haunted him. And years later, he got the opportunity to investigate, and you know, he was 45, 50 by this time. And with all due respect to this man, I mean, he really investigated properly, and he actually solved what happened. And it turned out that it was a bunch of Mexican guys coming in trying to take over the operation. So a couple of the American guys got together and murdered them, and then tried to make it look like a Sasquatch so the police wouldn't investigate. And because the Mexicans tended to be more superstitious, so they were scared of the Sasquatch rumours, and they stayed away. And that turned out to be all it was, just a very, very violent man, killed a load of guys, ran them over with heavy goods vehicles and tore them up with forklift trucks. And then they got these two drugged up young guys to see the bodies and said, oh my God, it's the Sasquatch again, you know, and it just stuck in their head. So they went out panicking, and that did the job for them. And nobody's really come up with any positive evidence that these things really exist. The Yeti thing, well, we're going to read through it now. There's this thing about a hand, and the hand got proved to be fake, and the Yeti scalp got proved to be a goat's hide. You know, all of these things turn out to be not true. There was some compelling evidence. A guy whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but he does Missing 411. He was an ex-policeman who got thrown out of one of the American state police forces under mysterious circumstances. He's not really sure what he did or why he got thrown out, but he's a good investigator. He went on to investigate Bigfoot, and he came back and said, I've proved Bigfoot existed. They've got hairs, and when the DNA test for the hairs came back, they were something like 20% human and the rest was unknown DNA. So that would seem to be compelling evidence, where you've got sightings of Bigfoot, and then somebody comes out and says, we've got the evidence, we've got DNA proof, found where these creatures were supposed to be. Sounds great, but then it came back slowly that the resources he had used weren't very good, and it kind of opened some questions about the validity of the scientific evidence, and it kind of blew his argument to pieces, unfortunately, and it made him look bad. So he gave up the Bigfoot trail and went on to investigate missing people instead, which again is fascinating. It's actually probably more interesting than Bigfoot. But we've never really had solid, irrefutable proof that any of these things exist, and that's really sad. It's interesting that we've got these witnesses, and the witnesses corroborate each other over and over again. The witnesses tell the same story. That's very interesting, but unfortunately it's not evidence. Evidence is, even photographs and things like that don't tend to prove it. We've got that very famous video where somebody shot one of these apes walking in a funny way through the woods, and it turns to look. It's one of the most famous videos of Bigfoot ever shot. And in the Sasquatch video, the documentary I was telling you about, he actually interviewed the man and said, "Yep, that was me. I was dressed up in that costume. It was a cheap costume, shot at a bad angle with lots of light. It was me. I faked it. I faked it for this drug arrangement thing." Is he lying? Not really sure why he would lie, because he didn't get famous off this documentary. He didn't get paid for his interviews. Didn't make any money. Not really sure why he'd lie about being involved in it, but people do lie. So, I mean, you've got to take him as a liar anyway, because that's by definition what he was doing. He was lying about being Bigfoot, or he was lying about pretending to be Bigfoot. While I was going through what videos to watch, I looked at a lot of up-to-date video clips, and one of them it's very clearly fake. It was a couple of children shot a video of a Yeti, and the footprints that they were following were very clearly their own shoes, where they put them side by side, and you could still see the tread patterns. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. A lot of this turns out to be fake, unfortunately. I wish people would stop doing it, but they don't. We get a lot of evidence in shrieks and screams from the woods, but again, it's not really evidence because it's not evidence. It's sounds. It could be wild cats, it could be a bear, it could be anything, it could be a person, it could be somebody playing pranks. The sound, again, is not evidence. There are sounds in the woods that would freak you out. As a really, really off-tangent example, when I was off-road riding in London, in Kent, outside London, I was all over the place. The bike would just slide all over the place. I couldn't stay upright in the mud. And I thought, oh, I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at off-road riding. Then I came out here riding in the same mud, and it's really easy because mud is totally different here because it's got clay in it, so it's very sticky here. The English mud is like riding on ice. So, you know, if you're going to go to a forest that you don't know, then the sounds are going to be weird, they're going to be different, there's going to be different animals. Years and years ago, I was on my uncle's farm. I spent a lot of time there growing up, and I was out one morning hunting rabbits. And we heard this, I was on my own, I heard this scream, and it was blood curdling. It was the most horrible sound I've ever heard. It was like a young woman or a child being torn apart, is the only way I can describe it. It was just awful. And I saw this weird creature. It was like a rabbit, but about twice or three times the size. Wasn't a cat, and it was just weird. And it turned out to be a coypu. Which is a known animal that had just died out a decade or so before, but there were still a few examples left running around, and I saw one and I heard it scream. If you've ever heard foxes, wild foxes in the West, when they scream, it sounds like a child being killed. It's the worst noise, but it is just a wild animal, and it's not even an aggressive noise. It's how they communicate. So it's very easy to get these things wrong. And I'd like to think that mostly that's what it is. Mostly I think they're in good faith where people are just making mistakes because they want to believe. I want to believe. I want to believe that this is true. I'd love for this to be true. I would love somebody to report tomorrow, open it up. I open my phone and find a news article. They've captured one alive. We've got Bigfoot. We've got an 8-foot tall monkey thing. Maybe we will. I mean, there was a fossil found quite recently of a 10-foot ape, a 10-foot upright standing ape that was alive at the same time as we were. So there are examples of this sort of thing happening. There are precedents where we have found creatures that would easily be this kind of thing. Whether or not some of them survived in certain environments, we don't know. So I'm going to read through this as normal, and then we'll get you to do the questions as normal. And then we'll see what you come up with. And mostly I think what I'm interested to see is what you make of all this. So we'll go through it, then I'll give you some time to do the questions, and then we'll see what you come up with. Okay, so we'll do the normal thing. I'll read through now because there's no point getting you guys to do it. Okay, the Yeti, monsters of the mountains. Wild people, are they part of the human imagination or a reminder of times when our ancestors, too, roamed the forest naked? For most people, the mention of wild people brings to mind hairy creatures that walked upright and two ands and lived in the wilderness. Wild people exist in most cultures. In Europe, they appear hairy and leaf-covered in carvings on medieval churches. In the 20th century, much of the earth had been explored, but there are still pockets of rarely visited wilderness and a belief in wild people that persists to this day. And we've got a picture of China, India, Nepal, which relates to where they're seen. In the mountainous Asian country of Nepal, between India and Tibet, there is an enduring tradition of a strange creature called the Yeti, also known as the abominable snowman. Most of the stories about the Yeti are told by local people, the Sherpas. The Yeti have been described differently by the various people who claim to have seen it, but most agree that it's a hairy creature, rather ape-like, with hair ranging in colour from grey to reddish brown. Yeti authorities also believe that there are 3 different types of such creatures, each a different size. The first type, called a Thelma, is said to be small, about the size of a 15-year-old boy. The second type, the Mite, is supposedly the size of an average human adult, while the third, called the Zute, is believed to grow up to 2.5 meters in height. Sightings have been recorded for centuries, and there are even pictures of the Yeti in the early books from Nepal. The Sherpas, who have lived in the region for centuries, are firmly convinced that the Yeti exists. In fact, as far as they're concerned, the Yeti is just another part of the local wildlife, with nothing special about them. It is not only the locals who claim to have seen them. In 1832, a British man, B.H. Hodson, saw and described a creature that walked upright, was covered in dark hair and had no tail, while in 1948 a Norwegian called Jan Frostis, ironic, who was prospecting for uranium, actually claimed to have been attacked by one near Zemu Gap in Sikkim, a Himalayan state. China also has a long-standing history of recorded Yeti sightings. 2,000 years ago, the Chinese poet Q1 wrote of mountainous ogres, while in the Tang dynasty, AD 618 to 907, the historian Li Yanshu described a band of hairy men living in a area called Jiangling. Sightings have even been recorded in the 20th century. In the 1940s, a Chinese biologist saw a female wild man which had been shot. The biologist thought that the creature looked like a Peking man, the Chinese version of Homo erectus or up man. Sir Edmund Hillary became world famous in 1953 when he and his Sherpa guide Tenzing Norgay became the first people to climb to the top of Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. Hillary was firmly convinced that the Yeti existed. He claimed to have seen its footprints in the snow during a December 1951 ascent with British mountaineer Eric Shipton. Shipton is the first person ever to have taken a photo of Yeti footprints. The footprints he photographed, had partly melted into oval shapes, but where snow covered the ice was thin, the tracks were much clearer. He described them as being 3-toed with a broad thumb to the side. In the report to the Times, Shipton also said that he had seen similar footprints before in various parts of the Himalayas and in the Karakoram, but these were the best preserved. Later, during the 1953 ascent, Hillary again found tracks he thought belonged to the Yeti. He returned to Nepal in 1960, hoping to photograph one of the creatures. He went first to the village named Bedding, where he gathered stories about sightings, then went on to a place called Kumjung, where a famous Buddhist monastery kept a Yeti scalp. Hillary was allowed to see the scalp, which he described as looking like a pointy cap of reddish hair, but he said there's no way of telling exactly what it was. Hillary managed to persuade the monks to lend it to them and send it to the laboratories in Chicago and Paris for analysis. The scientists, however, were not able to come to a definite conclusion. The Americans said it was the scalp of a wild goat antelope, while the French thought it came from a bear. In any case, despite seeing the footprints, Hillary never did see a live Yeti or was able to prove that they exist. To this day, expeditions searching for the Yeti have never returned with substantiated sightings or even with any evidence of its existence. Told you. What is the Yeti and why do we know so little about it? Prehistoric China was home to a type of ape called the Gigantopithecus. According to one theory, the Yeti might be descended from this creature. Not much is known about Gigantopithecus. Oh God, I'm tired, sorry. Only a few teeth and jawbones have been found, but this has been enough for scientists to come up with some theories. Because the size of the teeth, it is thought to have been as tall as 2.7 meters in height. It's pretty tall. The heavy coating of enamel on the teeth suggests that it lived on food that needed grinding, seeds and roots. The teeth of modern apes have only a thin layer of enamel, and their front teeth are designed to shred, then chew their food. It is also possible that the animal was a biped, a creature that walked on 2 feet, and that it left the forest to roam the savanna from China to the foothills of the Himalayas. It's possible that there could be an animal we know nothing about living high up in the mountains. There are many inaccessible places in the mountains where the creature could live without ever being found. Indeed, in places the vegetation is so thick that it is almost impossible to get through. Creatures that had lived in such a place for thousands of years would certainly know their way around and could hide quite easily. In addition, the valleys between the mountains would supply plenty of food. So why can the Yeti be seen in the mountains? It has been suggested that it travels between valleys where there are only a few trails, and human and animals alike have to use them. The Sherpas also believe that there is salt in a certain moss which grows on rocks in the snowfields that the Yeti favours, while a zoologist called Ivan Sanderson thinks that they might be after the vitamin E in some of the lichens that grow in high altitudes. After all, he points out, some birds fly thousands of miles to breed at the edge of the polar snows, which then melt in spring, looking for the plants and insects which provide the baby birds with vitamin E. So why shouldn't the Yeti be doing the same? Well, there's many reasons why the Yeti wouldn't be doing the same, because it's a Yeti and not a bird. It does annoy me when we get these fairly sophisticated theories about what this might be doing or why that might be like this, or maybe it evolved from this creature, when we've got no evidence to base even its existence on, let alone that it may or may not have come from previous incarnations of various animals. And even if we did manage to nail down the Yeti, that would be a problem, because then it would give credence to the sightings of Bigfoot. And if the Yeti evolved from a Chinese animal, then where did the American one come from? Because these are very widely separated apart. So it just raises more and more questions. It's like all of these things. I have an interest in these things personally. The closest, we've got them in England too, quite a few. We've got the Loch Ness Monster, which is the most famous one, of a sea creature living in Loch Ness. And to put this in perspective, Loch Ness is a lake, a very, very big lake, a very deep lake. If you emptied the water out, you would be able to hide the entire human race inside the lake 7 times over. That's how big it is. It's huge. So it's quite possible that underwater creatures could be down there. But we've sent in boats with radar and all sorts of other experiments, and we've never found a trace. They do find sometimes weak radio signals that suggest that something's down there, but we never get any credence to it. Last week there was a photograph of something very big swimming through the loch, which looks very much like a very long fish, and that's kind of sparked interest in it over again. But this is what happens: somebody will take a photo or a video and everybody's excited again, and they'll send in an expedition and nothing will come of it, and it all goes to sleep again. We've got big cats, big black wild animal cats on the moors, with all sorts of different sightings of different creatures, but none of them are particularly exciting. We certainly don't have any Bigfoot. We leave that to the Americans. So this is what people think. What do you think? And that's what it's really all about, because at the moment there is no real scientific evidence. There's no proof this way, there's no proof that way. So really it comes down to your belief. Do you believe that there are things in this world that you don't know about? I do believe that there are. I mean, science is just a joke at this point. I was reading something earlier about science suggests that this new discovery could change the way we look at this. I said, well, yeah, but we've been looking at it wrong anyway. We've proved that we've been looking at that wrong, and now you're trying to prove evidence of why we're wrong and then expand on that. We're expanding on ideas that were disproved decades ago. So it annoys me that science is becoming so religious and isn't scientific anymore. You know, we're making these breakthroughs, and then these scientists are getting paid to look the other way. And it annoys me. If we really wanted to find this thing, we could. If it existed, we could find it. But there are some of these expeditions that are sent out purely to prove they don't exist. So where do you stand on this? Ultimately, it has to be your choice. What do you think? Me, I keep an open mind. I would love this to be true. I would love there to be real creatures out there that we don't know about. When I did this the first time, my grade 11 class, we were looking at, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a cryptid that lived in Cambodia, and it was an unknown animal, but it was a former animal. It was like a bison or something, and yeah, I found it on a website. It was a bison, and it was the legend was that some of them had been sighted in a forest, and someone said, no, we have those. It's our national animal. So no, it's a cryptid. Look, it's on this website, and sure enough, it was the national animal, and it was common, and I've seen them since. So you have to be very careful what you believe, because information is often very wrong, and that's just how it is. So answer questions 1 through 13. Those of you who are here, you can do it in your books. Those of you that are not, I want you to put it into the question on Google Classroom and make sure you submit them. And question 14, to add to it, what do you think? What do you believe? That's what I really want to know, what you think. We've seen the documentary now, we've done this. What do you think? So I'll give you some time to do the questions, and then we'll come back with the answers. Don't need that. Right, so you've had some time, and now we're coming back with the answers, such as they are. Number 1, who are the Sherpas? Well, the Sherpas are the people that live in Nepal. They're a very strong people, because they have to be, just to survive there. We use them in the British Army, the Gurkhas, who are the military trained Sherpas, and they are honorary British servicemen. And I remember seeing an article where somebody was saying that he was training with these guys, the Gurkhas, and he said, I've never seen such power. He said they were running up these mountains like they were nothing, and we could barely walk up them. They're saying these guys are incredibly fit, incredibly strong. They fight like warriors. So they're treated with a lot of respect in the British Army. Although a couple of years ago they cancelled their pensions, and there was a big outcry in England. It hit the news. They said, no, you've got to pay these people. They're that well respected that the public said, no, you have to look after them, you have to pay them. And they got their pensions. So yeah, they're the people that live in this area who go taking people around. What is the most common description of a Yeti? An ape-like creature, usually no tail, usually standing upright on its back legs. Yeah. What are the footprints of Shipton's photograph look like? Well, it was okay. They'd started to melt, so the outlines were slightly blurred. We're not sure, but 3-toed with an additional thumb sticking out the side, which does sound very ape-like. The 3-toe thing is a bit weird, because there aren't many animals with 4 toes. We tend to have 5, so that's a bit weird. I think rats have 3 claws. Off the top of my head, I think rats, and then they have a vestigial kind of lump on the inside of their paws where they never develop the knuckle. What name is given to the tallest Yeti? Now I'm going to have to look this up myself. Make sure you remember this, because this is another thing that came up in an exam once. So we've got the 3. We've got the tallest is the Zute, grows up to 2.5 meters. I mean, that's, again, baby's crying, that's, again, rather stupid. It's like it grows up to 2.5 meters. Well, we don't know that. And we also don't know that we're not looking at the same creature. It's to say that this creature comes in 3 different shapes and sizes. Well, we could be looking at the children, a female or a male of all of the same species. But instead, we've got the idea that there are 3 distinct different creatures when we haven't found evidence that one exists. So instead we're making up 3, but we could be looking at male and females. And in nature, males and females often look very, very different, especially in birds. The colorings are completely different, the build is different. It's not unusual to see quite diverse creatures in nature. And again, the children look very different again. So we could be seeing an example of that. Why are the Sherpas so sure the Yeti exists? I think it's part of their culture. It's been handed down a very long time. They believe it's just simply part of everyday life. Very much like in Cambodia, where tigers were a part of everyday life. Tigers and elephants were in the jungles. They're gone now, but they were there. You're never going to see them. You're never going to deal with a tiger because you'd be dead. But they're here. It's just one of those things that happens to be there that you'll never deal with because you're not stupid enough to walk into their hunting grounds. I have actually been stupid enough to do exactly that. Why was Sir Edmund Hillary so sure the Yeti existed? I think he believed the hype. I think he bought into the ideas that everyone was telling him they existed. He found the footprints, or he found footprints, which got him to go back. I think he was probably one of those people that just wanted to believe. Simple as that. What prehistoric creature from China? Gigantosaurus, thought to be descended. Yeah, I mean it's a theory. It doesn't hold a lot of water, nor is it ever going to be disproved, because we'd have to find one of these creatures and test its DNA to do that. So it's thought that it could be descended from that, but it also could be descended from a bear. It could be a bear. We don't know. What evidence have scientists gathered to conclude that the Gigantopithecus is probably 2.7 meters tall? Jawbone. This is another problem. We found the upper jaw and the size of the teeth, but that doesn't always point that the skeletons are going to be a certain shape. We believe the bigger the tooth, the bigger the head, the bigger the head, the bigger the body. But that doesn't always hold true. Different races of humans have different shaped heads, different sized teeth, different jaw lines. We are all very, very different. And we also can't put a lot of stock into any of this. Head sizes are very different. Neanderthals and the other one, I can't remember the name of them. Humans are based on 4 proto-humans: Nicean man, Neanderthal. I always forget this other one. It'll come to me while I'm talking. And the other one, its head is twice the size of ours, but way, way, way lower intelligence. And the scientists are always tying themselves up in knots, trying to work out how these creatures with a bigger head were supposedly less intelligent. Because our heads have got smaller, but we've got more intelligent. And they can't work that out because it doesn't make sense. We can explain it partly away by saying that the grooves in our brain, you know that the human brain is full of these little grooves, and that increases the surface area. The smoother the brain, the dumber the creature. To the point, I think koalas are among the dumbest creatures in the world. They have a completely smooth brain with no extended surface area, and they're really supposed to be kind of stupid. Another one was that part of their brain was used to focus their eyes, and their eyes were much more powerful than ours, so they had this really great sense of sight, and it took half their brain to work that out, which makes no sense because almost every creature on Earth has better sight than we do. You take a bird, it can see for miles. An owl, for instance, an owl, I don't know if you know what they are. They're like a weird night hunting bird, and they move their head almost all the way around because their eyes can't move. They're fixed in their head, but they can navigate by the light of a single candle half a mile away. That makes it daylight to them. So they have incredibly good night vision and a brain the size of a small coin. So it doesn't make sense that their brains would be much larger because they had better eyesight. It doesn't work. How are the teeth different from modern apes? I have to admit I've forgotten. Only a few teeth and jawbones have been found, but enough for scientists to come up with theories. Because of the size of the teeth, thought to be as tall, the heavy coating of enamel on the teeth suggests that it lived on food that needed grinding, seeds and roots. Heavy enamel needed grinding, just like us. We have heavy enamel because we grind vegetables. I know a lot of people think, oh, humans are meat eaters. No, we're not. There are no great apes that are meat eaters. None of them. We have heavy enamel teeth, we have blunt teeth at the front for cutting off vegetables, and we have grinding teeth at the back. There's not a single carnivore with grinding teeth. There isn't. You don't grind meat, they swallow it whole. So it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, they were vegetarians. Why would it be possible to be ignorant about the existence of an animal? Because it's a wide open place where people rarely go, and it's possible to hide people or hide creatures. It's not outside the realm of possibility, and that's where this falls apart, of course, because yeah, okay, there are wide open spaces where these creatures could be hiding, but they're not hiding. People say that they've seen them all the time, and they come into these towns, but we've got no evidence of that happening, only eyewitness. So it all falls apart. Explain the meaning of these words. Persists, carries on, keeps going. Enduring, doesn't give up, it lasts. Tradition, something that's been passed on and observed, something that we keep doing over and over again. The authorities are whoever's in charge, for better or worse. Upright, straight up. Walking on your two legs, upright, not laying down. Ascent is a climb. Substantiated is a suggestion of proof. It can be proved. And theories are ideas, and that's all they are. Do you think there's enough evidence in this report for the existence of the Yeti? No. I don't think. I think it's a badly worded question. I don't think this report suggests that there is any evidence. I don't think it's doing that. I think it's giving you the information. It's not trying to suggest that these things are real. It's a very short introduction. I don't think there's enough words here to actually be doing that anyway. But no, I don't think there's enough evidence here. There's no evidence here. There's a few found teeth, some footprints which are, by their own admission, worn, so they don't really work properly. So no, there's no evidence here. Certainly no evidence that warrants this kind of thing. Do you think that rare creatures should be hunted for scientific reasons? Give reasons for your answers. Now this is going to be a very personal one. So is the last one. And there's no wrong answer when it's reading for ideas. Do you think they should be hunted for scientific reasons? I'm afraid that yes, I do. For personal reasons, I'm curious. I want to know. If we were to find this thing, it would tell us a lot about who we are. It would be able to tell us where we fit into the chain of, evolution, for want of a better word, where the great apes came from. It could tell us a lot about how evolution or how specialization works. It could be that these things are simply Neanderthals and have survived. And if Neanderthals really were that intelligent, they know to stay away from us. So yeah, I think we should be hunting them for scientific reasons, so long as we can do so without creating an impact on their environment or their survival. I think it's acceptable to tag them so that we know where they are, but it's not okay to... Sometimes these tags are huge and they just destroy the creature's daily life. But if we can do it in a subtle way that doesn't really have a huge impact on the creatures and lets them live in peace, then I don't see any reason why not. But I don't think the word hunt is the correct word. I think we should be investigating them for scientific reasons, but we should not be allowing them to be hunted, nor should we be infringing on their freedom. That would be my opinion. What's yours? So do you believe in them? I hope you've answered that question. What do you think? So what do you think? Me? I don't know. I'd like to believe, I really would, but I don't think the evidence is there. If somebody said to me, do you believe in Yetis? Do you believe in Bigfoot? Are they real? If someone came at me, are they real? I would have to say at this point, no, because there isn't the evidence for them. It's just not there. But I want there to be. I would love to believe in them. I would love for somebody to say, here is the evidence. When I look at other conspiracies or things of that nature, there is evidence. There's some evidence that proves it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a widespread theory. The only thing going against what I just said is the fact that this is an enduring, widespread phenomenon. People do claim to be seeing these all the time. There are lots of old people that say, yep, we know they exist. We've seen them. We know. We don't care what you think. And they're not trying to prove it to anyone. They're just telling you, yep, they exist. Trust me. I know they exist. And that's very interesting. But unfortunately, it isn't proof. So, That's what I think. Make sure you hand in your answers. Those of you that aren't in class, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.